I'm Mary Pipino, and welcome to Fit for You, the show that teaches you how to live a healthier and more fit lifestyle. I'm so excited, as I always am, about doing my shows, but today's extra special. Why? Because my special guest is a very, very dear friend whom you may already know. She's been on my shows before. She is an icon, not only in the fitness industry, but an icon and role model for women, for people, for human beings, and for fitness. You may recall Bodyworks. It was the first female gym in the Youngstown area. And this is Eve opening her Bodyworks at her plaza in 1994. And I have a little picture here with the ribbon cutting and many dignitaries that attended. It was a really big deal when Bodyworks opened. I don't want to take up too much more time talking about Eve. I want her to tell you her story herself. Welcome to Fit for You. It's all about Eve. It is my honor and my pleasure to introduce you to my dear friend, my idol, and someone who I truly love, Eve Bevilacqua.
Hello.
It is so exciting to have you today. And as I noted in my intro, we started to discuss your history in fitness before we were going to do our last show. And it was so impressive that I said, you really do deserve a show dedicated to you. And you know what, Eve? You're such an inspiration and such a role model for so many. And especially the ladies in our audience for this show. I think you're really going to be inspired.
I hope so.
By the end of today. And you wanted to make a little comment as you were talking about what today's all about.
This is so much fun to do this. I had to go through my history and find out things that I did 40, 50 years ago. And it was so much fun, and I think that you should do that. I think everybody in our audience should do that. Either make a tape or a recording or write down your history. You know, maybe your great-great-grandchildren will find your history and they'll say, you know what, that little Susie is just like Aunt Mary.
Exactly, and you know what else it does? And it's good for your self-esteem because sometimes, you know, you get in the doldrums and we go through difficult times and we think, what have I really accomplished in my life? And you probably have accomplished a lot more than you realize.
An awful lot. I was surprised when I went through my stuff and I thought, did I do all that? And I'm sure everybody would feel the same way. So make a record of your history.
Well, and I don't like to read from notes, but there is so much here that my assistant Ryan and I worked really hard to organize.
And this is a surprise for me, too. I don't know what she's going to ask me.
Yes, it totally is. So I have to work through my timeline here. We're going to divulge your age a little bit. Born in the 1940s in Youngstown, Ohio. And very fortunate as a child, just kind of fell into a family that lived a natural and healthy lifestyle, right? Mom cooked great food.
Yes, we had a garden, and my dad was into vitamins and holistic living ever since I could remember.
What did your father do for a living?
He was a steel salesman, and he had a steel company in Mississauga, Ontario. But when I was very young, he sold Hoover sweepers. We owned a gas station on Glenwood Avenue, a Texaco gas station. He was a Nichols Bakery man. He worked for the United States Post Office. He worked for the FBI for a while.
What an interesting gentleman.
Yeah, he was a very interesting guy. We lived in Miami, Florida for a while because he was down there doing business with Cuba.
Now remember that, audience, because we're going to come back to that. There's a little history here as to Eve's background there too. We talk about all the things you did, and you know it's what kids used to do. But you were the so-called beautiful tomboy, climbing and jumping out of trees, riding bikes, sledding, skating. Those are the kind of things that, you know, and we have available to us today that so many of our kids and adults aren't doing that we can partake in, even in this, our lovely little area of Youngstown, Ohio.
Yes, and you know what, Mary, in those days, the boys and girls played together. I had a big backyard, I had a bat, I had a baseball, I had a glove, and if the boys wanted to play, they had to allow me to play.
I love it. Now, you also ran hurdles, but ran into a little hurdle in that, right?
Yes.
When it came to track.
Yes, because girls weren't allowed to be in track in those days. That women were not athletes in the 50s. We were very well taken care of.
Yes.
But I loved to run, and I liked to jump hurdles, and Red Angelo was our coach at Cheney at that time, and I lived close to this high school, so I'd go up there and he would allow me to run with the boys until there was a meet, and then I wasn't allowed to. But he gave me a lot of pointers, and he was a very nice man. He was a good coach.
And for the audience to sort of relate, if anybody watches the old I Love Lucy shows, which I adore,
I do
this
too.
is kind of the time frame we're talking about.
Yes,
you know, when
the 50s.
Yes.
Happy days.
Yes, and women working wasn't, wasn't very popular.
Oh, no, my mother was home. Yeah, she did not work.
Yeah, women had their place in society to take
Absolutely.
care of the men, and the men were the breadwinners.
Yes.
Okay. 14 years old. Let's talk about Florida a little bit. You're living in Florida December through May, and you're shopping in Burdines, and you had a lovely little experience. I think it was kind of a beginning of the modeling.
Yeah, it probably was. A lady just walked up to me and said, we're having a teenage show to show new fashions for young girls. Would you like to be one of our models? Well, of course. Wow, that was so much fun. I said, yes, I would, and my mom agreed to it, surprisingly. And I was in shows at Burdines almost every year for about 3 years.
And for those who don't remember, the really beautiful department stores did fabulous in-house style shows, and it was really a big deal.
Oh, it was.
If you were asked to be a model, I mean, it was all about, how you looked and how you carried yourself, and that's how they promoted their clothes.
Yes.
You didn't, have the other advertising venues and things you had today. And I mean, you really wore them and showed them, and that was probably one of their strongest marketing tools.
It was fun. It was fun.
And it was charming. I loved it. Okay, then after modeling there, you come when you're around 18, 19 years old, you're back in Youngstown, you're attending YSU, and you start to do a little bit of television.
I worked for WKBM.
And how did you get started
I was
with
their
that?
receptionist, and they allowed me to do some commercials. And I remember I did commercials for American Home Improvement. And I could not get the word aluminum out of my mouth. And the first time they said they had never had so many takes because I just could not say aluminum home siding. I couldn't get it out, but they worked with me and I finally did say it. I was also on the Jerry Ducey show. At that time, the Three Stooges made a comeback. And Jerry Ducey, who was on WKBM, we had a lot of in-house shows. He was the fourth stooge, Stanley, the fourth stooge, and I was his secretary, Miss Eve. And I would be on once a week, and we would give little deputy badges to the children who did special deeds at home. It was fun.
Oh,
it was a lot of fun.
Now, let me remind the audience then, there were 3 networks and basically 3 channels.
Yes.
It wasn't like we have, cable TV today.
That's right.
So if you were involved in television and you were on one of the network shows, even a local show, it was a huge ordeal.
Yes.
I mean, that was a really big deal.
And let me tell you this, it was such an honor to work for Mr. Williamson, old Warren P. Williamson. What a great guy, what a wonderful motivator, and he was a teacher. He's a great teacher.
Fantastic. Well, then that led to a really big break. Now, I hope I have the timeline right.
Okay.
Because now we're going to talk about New York.
Okay.
And we're going to talk about Colgate-Palmolive.
Yes.
So you were selected as one of the choice soap girls.
Yes, there was
Tell us about this.
an employment agency in Youngstown, Ricky Wheaton, and they had an interview, and I was chosen as one of the choice girls and went to New York City.
Now, they were interviewing girls all over the country.
Yeah,
This was not local.
Yes,
okay.
yes.
I mean, it happened to be, we were one of the locals they were using, but you made it as one of the 3 from,
There was another girl from the area, too, that also made it, Judy Yerke. She was another one of the choice girls.
Now, you were Miss?
I was Miss Dry.
There was Miss Oily.
Miss Oily and Miss Normal. And Miss Dry always got a laugh. And we put on fashion shows in grocery stores. Keep in mind, there were no malls in those days. So we would have to go into grocery stores or department stores. And since we were Colgate-Palmolive, we went into grocery stores. And we modeled. I was the skinniest of the girls, and we had other models too, so I always got the bikinis.
Oh.
I was skinny, but I still had these. So I always got the bikinis.
Now, mind you, we were in a grocery store.
In a grocery store, in the middle of winter, in a bikini, in New York State, Pennsylvania, West Virginia. And our headquarters was in New York City. We went to modeling school while we were there. I was there when John Glenn had the parade. It was a lot of fun to be with Colgate-Palmolive.
Because I was going to say, my note for this time in the timeline is that is when John Glenn circled the earth.
Yes.
And
I don't even remember what year that was. I guess 62, 61.
And you were living in New York at the Sheraton Hotel.
At the Sheraton Hotel. And one night we decided to go to the Jack Parr show. Jack Parr, when we got there, we were very disappointed. He wasn't there. Orson Bean was there. Orson Bean used to take over Jack Parr's show. Well, you used to write these cards in the old days, and they would say, you know, do you have a question for the host or something? And we wrote on there, would you like to meet the Choice Girls? Well, that was very provocative in 1962. The Choice Girls, you know, where did these girls? So they did come and talk with us to ask us who we were. But when Orson Bean talked with us in the audience, he said, we have the Choice Girls here. Well, everybody had a good laugh. And of course, when I said I'm Miss Dry, there was even more laughter. But we did get to be on the Orson Bean show in the audience. It was fun.
That is fantastic.
Yeah, a lot of fun.
And talking about your day during this, I believe it was a 6-month period in New York.
Yes,
for the Choice Girls.
Yes.
You started out with breakfast. Now, was it a healthy breakfast?
No, we got, am I allowed to say this?
You are allowed. Go right ahead. I think you're allowed.
We had our choice between a Bloody Mary, a bottle of beer, or scotch. Well, they used to refer to me as the corn-fed Ohio girl because I didn't know anything from drinking. I was not very bright and very naive being from Ohio, even though for those few years in Florida. And I decided, well, I didn't like Bloody Marys. I didn't like a beer. So I would try scotch. Well, it took me about a week to get used to it because I didn't like it. And we would just, every morning, because I guess they figured we had a hangover, which I didn't, but every morning we would get delivered to our room when we were in New York, our alcohol of choice. And I got used to scotch, and to this day I'm still a doer's girl.
And did you have any food?
When we would get down to the kitchen.
I mean, they'd give you a little breakfast
get to the restaurant,
before. Because, and you know, I think that was so, you know, you would calm, so everybody was calm and relaxed.
Yeah, I don't know what that was. I don't know what it was about, but we were calm and relaxed.
Absolutely. And then you went from breakfast to modeling for 3 hours. 3 hours of modeling school. Yeah. And then lunch.
It was fun. And then when we were on the road, you know, we would go on the road with our buses.
Yeah.
And go on the road to do our modeling shows. It was a lot of fun. It was very interesting.
Okay, the 6th month is over, and you're debating on what to do, and I think Mom and Dad step into the picture and say, what are you going to do?
Yeah, they want me home anyhow. They wanted me to stay home. I came home and I got a job with E.F. McDonald Company.
In Youngstown.
In Youngstown. The E.F. McDonald Company were the sponsors for Plaid Stamps. Plaid Stamps was the competitor with S&H Green Stamps. And I was the Bonnie Lassie. I made my hair red, and I wore a little tartan and a little plaid skirt.
Now tell them who Bonnie Lassie is, because some of the
She is the representative or the logo for Plaid Stamps. And I visited A&Ps in the tri-state area, and I opened redemption stores. When you get your books of stamps, you would go to the redemption store and buy something.
I remember as a little girl, my mom
remember?
would go to the grocery store, and boy, it was a big deal, because then when she would come home with the stamps, we'd want to put the little stamps in the book. Then when you accumulated so many books, then you go to the redemption store and pick out whatever you could buy with the number of books you had.
Yes, and that's what I did. I circled around, I did some of that. But at the same time, I also worked for Arby's. A lot of people don't realize that Arby's, the word Arby's, is not for roast beef. Arby's means Raffle Brothers. The Raffle Brothers owned a restaurant equipment business in downtown Youngstown, and they were the ones who started Arby's. Very successful men, Leroy and Forrest Raffle, two of the finest men I ever knew. Leroy and Forrest were the only men that I ever knew at that time in the early 60s that really promoted women. They weren't forward with me. They treated me like their daughter. They were kind, generous, and they really wanted me to stay with the company. I opened Arby's. I opened the first Arby's on Boardman, Canfield Road, and I was dressed as a cowgirl, and we passed out free mocha shakes to everyone. Everybody got a free mocha shake. I got hooked on mocha shakes. I love mocha shakes to this day. But they were so wonderful to work for. And then I worked for Jib Jab. They opened a Jib Jab store.
Now, they were affiliated with Arby's, right?
Oh, they owned it. They owned it. And then they sold it, I believe, to Royal Crown was the first one that bought it. I don't know who owns it now. But they sold it to Royal Crown, and they moved to Florida, so I lost touch with them. But they were fine, fine people.
Well, then it led to something else that is a very, very big highlight in your history.
Yes.
That is phenomenal. Through WKBN, there was a photographer by the name of Bill Ensley who submitted your photography to a Miss Photography contest.
Which I knew nothing about. And I got a phone call that said, can you please write us a couple of paragraphs of why you would like to be Miss Photography? And then they told me who nominated me, so I called Bill immediately. He was a good friend. I used to babysit for him. He was a good friend, and Bill told me what I should write, so I did. And then they flew Mom and I to Atlantic City, right where Miss America used to be crowned. And I understand the Miss America competition is coming back to Atlantic City this year, which is wonderful. It was Master Photo Dealers and Finishers Association. Here's my trophy.
And she won, needless to say, of all the candidates in the country.
Well, you know what? I looked most like the girl next door. And that's what they were looking for. They weren't looking for someone real glamorous. They wanted someone that represented the Master Photo Dealers and Finishers Association. That's what they were. I don't even know if they're still in existence or not.
Well, and you know what's funny, as we show some of your photos, at that time, and they're fabulous, and we wouldn't think twice about them today, but they were a little risque, some of the things. And
let's go back to the bikini thing.
Right.
You know, I never quite got out of that one. I kept getting back into bathing suits, and that I worked for Steel City. You know that where the Vindicator comes in that orange slide-in thing?
Yes.
That sits next to your mailbox. Well, Steel City sold those, and I modeled for them, and we were all over, and my picture went to, I hope I'm not getting ahead of myself, my picture went to the Chicago Press Club. And
cool.
they had a little booth there, and they were showing what they make, what Steel City Manufacturing makes. Mary Pipino owned it at that time. And my picture was up there, and a photographer from Playboy saw my picture. And he called me first, and I was very flattered. And then he sent me tickets to come to stay at the Bunny Palace for 3 days. At this time, I was almost 21. My mother had a fit. She started making novena. My father was the one who said, no way, no way. For 50 cents, anybody could see you naked. You know, you don't want that. But I did have to turn it down. Now, I don't know if I would have been in the magazine. What they do, they bring you in, and then they take a picture. If it's good, you're the centerfold. If you're excellent but not centerfold material, you're in the front of the magazine, and then or the back of the magazine.